Well, I think it's clear so far that the efforts to smash the gangs are not going that well. And I think the big challenge here is that it's very difficult using an enforcement-based approach to prevent people from moving across the channel, because if you take down one smuggling gang, this is a thriving market and new people will move in to fill the space as long as there is still very high demand for people wanting to come to the UK.
The complete figures for legal and illegal migration in 2025 have been released. Small boat arrivals rose by 13% compared to the previous year, and that means 41,472 people who arrived in the UK via this illegal route. However, the 101,000 people claiming asylum last year represents a 4% drop on the figure from 2024. 30,657 asylum seekers were being housed temporarily in UK hotels at the end of 2025, and this was the lowest level for 18 months. Legal migration has also continued to fall. So let's get into all of this with Madeleine Sumption, the director of the Migration Observatory. Thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Good afternoon.
So, small boat arrivals are up. What does this say about and mean for the government's attempts to smash the gangs?
Well, I think it's clear so far that the efforts to smash the gangs are not going that well, at least in the sense that, it may be that there are more people being brought to justice. That's quite hard to measure, but certainly we don't see that feeding through into fewer people coming across the channel. And I think the big challenge here is that it's very difficult using an enforcement-based approach to prevent people from moving across the channel, because if you take down one smuggling gang, this is a thriving market and new people will move in to fill the space as long as there is still very high demand for people wanting to come to the UK. What we've seen recently is we've seen an increase in the number of Eritrean nationals, for example, coming to the UK. There are some indications that the price of being smuggled across the channel has decreased. And so all of these other factors, you've got policy factors, but then all of just these other factors, what's going on out there in the world is also having an impact.
So there's quite a bit of political noise that essentially amounts to just get a grip. How can it be that people can just row up to the sort of coast of this country and come in and we can't do anything about it? Is that sort of get a grip piece of rhetoric remotely justified? Is it possible if you did kind of get to it and with a bit more determination, you'd be able to do something about this number? Or is this something we just have to live with?
I think the really big challenge for the government here is that they are quite reliant on France. So I think there is a lot of stuff actually that France could do if they were really committed to ending or at least significantly reducing the small boats phenomenon, both on the enforcement side, but also accepting people back. I mean, in theory, this is not going to happen, but in theory, if France was willing to take back everyone who crossed the channel, that business model would disappear. There would still be some people would divert to other routes. Some people would would move back to lorries, which are less likely to be detected when they arrive. But I think, that there are things that France could do. The challenge for the government is just that for the UK government is that France doesn't want to do those things. And
why would it do that?
Well, indeed, France receives more asylum applications in most years than the UK does, and so they don't, quite reasonably, they don't see it as their problem. Obviously, there are, it's not good for France that they have this sort of organised criminal gangs inhabiting a lot of the northern coastline. So you can construct arguments that France should care about this as well, but clearly it's much less of a political issue for France than it is for the UK.
Let's look at some of the other figures. There's a 4% drop in people claiming asylum. Is that just a sort of random variation, or does it represent a real shift downwards?
I think these numbers do fluctuate up and down over time, so I wouldn't necessarily say, this shows there's a trend and it's going to continue. As we've just discussed, the number of people coming on small boats has gone up a little bit. So what's actually happening is that the decrease in asylum applications is driven by people not arriving on small boats. There was a decrease in the number of people arriving on student visas and then claiming asylum, and that could be because of just a decrease in the number of students coming to the UK and a crackdown on certain kinds of student applications, and particularly people bringing family members. So it's possible that was one of the things that fed through into fewer people on visas claiming asylum.
And what about these asylum hotels? Because on the one hand, you can see that this has gone down, but on the other, you think, well, it's actually more than 30,000 people, and the government has promised to eliminate their use entirely. Does that promise seem to you remotely realistic?
And I think if you look at the figures and the trajectory, certainly the government is not on track to eliminate the use of asylum hotels by the end of the parliament, because the numbers are sort of fluctuating up and down, but not really going in any clear direction. The big challenge, I think, that what would have to happen in order for the government to be able to significantly reduce or eliminate the use of hotels by the end of the parliament, you need one of three things, basically. Either you would need a significant reduction in the number of people claiming asylum, which the government is hoping for but won't necessarily see, or you need to find some way of enabling the asylum appeals. So there are a lot of people waiting who've been refused asylum. They're waiting in the court system, which really can't cope with the number of refused asylum seekers appealing their decisions at the moment. So they would need to do something, which the government have said that they want to try and sort out the appeal system. Again, that's a big institutional change, not easy to do overnight. Or they'd need to find some other form of accommodation for people to stay in. And one of the challenges for the government is actually progress on finding accommodation other than hotels has been really slow.
As you're quite close to the system, do you buy this idea, which is quite strong on the right, that the immigration courts consist of people who've built their careers on helping migrants achieve asylum or be accepted as legal migrants, and therefore they're inclined to accept these appeals? And so a lot of what's sucking people into doing things like coming across on boats is the promise of a hearing in these courts, which can go on a long time and then is liable to achieve a more favourable answer here than elsewhere. Is that just a caricature, or is there something to it?
I mean, I'm not the right person to comment, I think, on the, what's precisely going on with the immigration judges. Certainly it is true that a lot of immigration judges have also had, or in some cases still have, a practice in immigration law. I think, but yeah, working out exactly how that affects the decisions is, it's in an evidence-based way is a bit tricky. I think it's probably a stretch to say that asylum seekers coming across have a really detailed understanding of, who exactly is staffing the immigration courts. Often people have quite, it's not that they don't understand policy at all, but they don't have a sort of, detailed in the weeds understanding of it. But it may well be the case that people, we know in general there is some evidence that if the grant rate for asylum is relatively high, and that probably does appear, that's not just going to be initial decisions, but also through the courts, that if in general what people see is that other people they know are successfully claiming asylum and getting a positive decision at the end of the process, then that is one of the factors that affects people's decisions to come to the UK as opposed to going somewhere else.
Well, that was Madeleine Sumption, the director of the Migration Observatory.